Welcome to the Big Me Kickoff. I am your host, Kevin Noon. It is Thursday, January 25th, 2024. And big news here on the show. We are now sponsored. We have a partnership with No Naturals, and I will tell you about them here in a minute. But I want to thank No Naturals for joining us here on the Big Me Kickoff. That means that we are going to have a more regular schedule of shows. And the plan moving forward, I know you've heard this before, but now I have a sponsor behind me, so I have to do this. 3 times a week, at least one live, probably on Fridays. News could change some things here or there, as we've got so many brands here at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. So just keep an eye out there. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. We will get into who No Naturals is in a minute, but so much is going on right now. Obviously, everybody wants to talk about what's happening up north and the departure of Jim Harbaugh and what this means for the biggest rival for the Buckeyes. I am not going to talk about that one. Why? We have a lot of other shows on the channel that are talking about it. And at some point, there does become a level of oversaturation of a certain topic. And I don't want to take part in that, as I'm sure I will be on some of our programming talking about that. And as news breaks, we do go live and we'll see kind of what goes from there. What I want to talk about is NIL, and more specifically, comments from Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin, maybe some stuff from Paul Feinbaum, all these things about how Ohio State is gaming the system. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what exactly I want to that I want to sit there and put into their mouths, because they've got their own comments. And honestly, I think that Lane Kiffin's comments about Ohio State spending $13 million, a number that has certainly not been verified. These types of numbers are not out there, put out there for public scrutiny, for public accounting, or anything of that nature. I don't, it's not something we can FOIA. It's, the NIL is not run through the school. There's no freedom of information here. Ryan Day said, a year ago, it would be about $13 million to maintain, to land and maintain a roster. That was the target number. I think there was a piece out there, somebody used the number 13 as well. Whether or not they got it from Ryan's speech, or they came up with it on their own, or they just used it as I'm just going to throw a number out there. People are believing that this $13 million is a real number. And I'm not here to debate what that number is. It's not 13. It's less. But all of a sudden, Ohio State has figured out, hey, NIL is available. It should be used. We should make sure that these foundations have traffic pointed toward them. The university can't solicit specifically for participation, cooperation with this. I mean, they can say, please give to the collectives, but that's about as far as it can go. I want to give a huge amount of credit out there to 1870 Society and the foundation. I would feel better as an Ohio State alum seeing cooperation between these organizations and not them kind of taking shots and barbs. And I mean, it hasn't been as bad now as it was, I think, when both were trying to get up off the ground. But if I'm the consumer, if I'm the fan who wants to be supportive, how do I know who to give to, how to give, and things of that nature? But we'll pick up that in a minute. I feel like Howard Stern here. I'm going to do my very first live read on this show, and I've only read it through a couple of times. So if I stumble a little bit, I apologize. It's down here on the bottom. Are you ready for an entirely different edible experience? Welcome to No Naturals, where we're shattering the stereotype of one note, slow acting gummies. Let me get their banner up here. Forget waiting over an hour to feel the effects. Our gummies are like a sprinter out of the blocks, fast acting in just 15 to 30 minutes. Jumping off the ad, I can tell you I've tried these products. It takes about 30 minutes for me. But I highly recommend them. Back to the read. Picture this. You're not just choosing a flavor, you're choosing your vibe. With 5 experiences and 6 custom combos, you're in full control. Whether it's energy and focus without the crash, a peaceful slumber that lasts all night, or a game-changing burst of bliss and euphoria, these edibles are the real deal. And the best part? You don't need a doctor's recommendation. No Natural gummies are dispensary quality and discreetly delivered right to your door. So whether you're craving a productivity boost, a good night's sleep, or some blissful euphoria, say hello to No Naturals. Try them today and use code HUDDLE10 for 10% off your order at shop.nonaturals.com. Know your edibles, know your experience, No Naturals. So there you go. Talk about a little bit more because this is the first show that they've sponsored. It'll become a little bit more seamless into the show as we move forward. We have a couple month deal with them, and hopefully everybody out there tries them and they come back and want to extend, and we have a presenting sponsor for quite some time. But back to what I was talking about with NIL and the user trying to figure out what to do. It feels like the user has figured out. And to the credit of each of these collectives, they have done a better job getting their message out on social media. I know the foundation had a donation match that their board was matching donations over a certain period of time. 1870 has always done a very good job with graphics and things of that nature. I know people with both of the collectives. So people are like, Kevin, which collective are you supporting? Well, I'm part of the media, so I'm not putting money in either of them. That just feels like a conflict of interest to me. But with that being said, I'm not going to steer anybody to one or the other. And I'm sure somebody from one or the other may see this show and it's like, well, Kevin, I really wish you would send them to ours. That's not my position. Everybody's got to come to their own conclusions. I think the biggest thing is that people give to these collectives. They know that these collectives are working for the betterment of Ohio State athletics in terms of enriching these student athletes, financially for name, image, and likeness. So let's talk about Lane Kiffin's comments, where he kind of commented on the number. I think that was more signaling his own collectives there at Ole Miss about, look, this is kind of what the standard is now. This is, Ohio State is doing this. We cannot fall that far behind. And with that being said, Ole Miss picked up the number 1 transfer player on the board out there according to a lot of the beliefs in Walter Nolan. And just this morning, and I don't have the name of the player off the top of my head, they picked up a Washington offensive lineman, a lineman that I thought that Ohio State might kick the tires on for half a second and was told no. Ole Miss has had to, really rely upon the portal. So obviously down in Oxford, Mississippi, they're not broke. But I think there's a level of fear from many in the industry that Ohio State has finally figured this out, has gotten away from stopping itself. Ohio State is always very slow to adopt new technologies, new beliefs. Said this on other shows. So again, if you've heard me say it before, I apologize. Ohio State, not the first program out there to have $1 million assistant coaches. Athletic director Gene Smith comes out shortly after those start to happen. It's like, yeah, we're not really in that arena to do that. I think it may have been less than 12 months after those comments that Ohio State had $1 million assistant. Ohio State now has a $2 million assistant in Jim Knowles as defensive coordinator. I've not seen what Bill O'Brien's numbers are going to be yet. FOIA requests are in, things of that nature, public record requests. We'll get to that. Ohio State was also not going to get into the analyst arms race. Alabama famously was the first program of considerable note to bolster its staff with non-coaching coaches who were able to do the vast majority of things and not on-field coach. I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything beyond that because there's no reason to. The skeptics out there will be like, sure. When the cameras are put away, they're probably out there coaching. I don't care. They were first. Other programs followed. Ohio State, well, we're not going to get into that arms race. Well, I beg to differ. Ohio State did. Joe Philbin still there. Todd Fitch still there. Other assistants have come through the doors as analysts and moved on. Maybe Ohio State doesn't have 8 or 9 analysts, but Ohio State is in that mix. NIL starts. Ohio State seems to get lost in the woods a little bit early on. Now, do you view that as a case of Ohio State wants to come out slower and see what other programs are doing and make sure that they stay within the guardrails of what the spirit of the rule is? Is it a case of that just nobody necessarily knows how to give? Is it a case that Ohio State fans just aren't conditioned for NIL yet? I mean, we always talk about the days of the $100 handshake at XYZ other program. I mean, it is a shift in paradigms in a lot of ways of having to, feeling this urge to kick money into a collective for athletics. Obviously Texas A&M took to it like a fish to water. Didn't necessarily work out. I mean, they landed all the kids and then lost them. You got Florida and Florida State both being investigated by the NC2A for NIL, no-nos. So was Ohio State smart in maybe waiting to kind of see what was what? No, Ohio State did not land the Damon Wilsons of the world because of NIL. Ohio State certainly could circle a lot of kids and there'd be the questions, well, was that an NIL play or not? I'm not here to get into the makeup of this kid versus that kid and saying it was just all a money ploy, all a money grab to where they're going to go. But I mean, Ohio State does have NIL. Let me tell you, Ohio State does have NIL, but it certainly is not their lead. There are places out there, sorry, not sorry, that they lead the conversation with, and see our beautiful NIL. And we've gone into this, and people who love the Buckeyes are going to agree with me, and people who hate the Buckeyes are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. This is not a live show. I'm going to probably try and go live tomorrow on Friday. It's, Ohio State has always made the case of, if you're in this for like the short-term dollar, the immediate, NIL dollar, you may want to look around. If you want to sit there and get developed and get to get the contract in the NFL, we got you covered. And we can sit there and talk about Jaden Rashada and his $13 million deal or whatever the hell that was at Florida that didn't end up coming to be, and then he ends up going to where, Arizona State or something. It's quite ridiculous, just some of the stories out there of how people are trying to use NIL. But Ohio State brings in 6 players from the portal to date. and they've gamed the system somehow. Somehow they're doing something wrong. Ohio State brings back a roster full of players who had draft decisions, and suddenly Ohio State has ruined the integrity of the sport because of this. A certain team up north that just lost its head coach, it all comes back to them at some point. It all comes back to them. Is heads are falling off of people up there because of this situation. Pay no attention to the fact that Michigan had its one more year fund for 2023 to bring back the Blake Corums of the world and guys like that. Pay no attention to the fact that that team up north signs more players out of the portal yearly than Ohio State does. Pay no attention to the fact that that team up north's 2023 championship run was fueled by several players that it picked up in the portal. None of that matters because Ohio State is suddenly figuring it out. Ohio State has woken up from its slumber and has started to flex a little muscle. And now we are, having to listen to people talk about Ohio State gaming the system, not playing within the spirit of the rules. I was unaware that there were any rules to NIL largely in the haphazard way that it was implemented on a national level. Every state had to kind of come on board, and then I think we saw everybody balance it out to a certain extent. So, it's extremely frustrating to listen to that as my text messages are blowing up, and I can't do a damn thing about them right now because we are recording. So they will have to wait. What to make of it? Nothing. Paul Feinbaum out, on one stage in one arena is talking about how, Ohio State is doing this, that, and the other in this system. And then on another arena is talking about how Ohio State, you got to be blind if you're not considering Ohio State a strong possibility for preseason number 1 next year and a potential national champion. I mean, yeah, I guess you could sit there and both things could be true at the same time, but the first thing isn't true. I mean, it isn't true. I mean, Ohio State obviously has when you sit there and you accelerate from standing still to 60 miles an hour, that's going to be a lot more dramatic than the car that's already been going 40 trying to get up to 60. Ohio State, in a large part, was standing still in comparison to the other powers out there. Now, also, when we're looking at the portal, let's not forget that a couple things fell into Ohio State's lap. Ohio State probably is not getting the Alabama crew if certain things don't happen. Obviously, the retirement of Nick Saban is one of those things. I think when you look at Seth McLaughlin, certainly just a bad finish for McLaughlin personally in the Rose Bowl helped that happen. But if Nick Saban doesn't leave, maybe the McLaughlin thing happens, but Caleb Downs and Julian Sayin don't leave. Ohio State finished number 2 for Caleb Downs coming out of high school. There was a huge belief that Georgia was going to win the second time around, and it didn't. There were still some chapped feelings about UGA and the recruitment of Caleb's brother Josh, or lack thereof. Just a lot going on, but things happen. But Ohio State was able to show that, look, we still love you. We still want you. We recruited you heavily coming out of high school. We just could not overshadow Nick Saban. Well, Nick Saban's gone, so now you're here. With Julian saying Ohio State absolutely kicked those tires multiple times in the class of 2024 before, you know, landing on Air Noland. And I'm not even going to get into a quarterback room discussion. That could be tomorrow's show. That could be next week. We're going to have to come up with a lot more topics. That's one of the big things I'm working on here in terms of my discipline is staying focused on one or two topics and not talking about 12 things and then having nothing left to talk about for the rest of the week. So I got to stay focused on one topic. What are your thoughts on how NIL is working? Do you give to NIL? Not necessarily asking people to out themselves and be like, no, I don't give. But if you do, why do you give? Why, what is the reason behind your giving? I'm really curious about that. And that's it's not accusatory, I mean, it's congratulatory. Why is it that you give to the NIL? I mean, obviously, the vast majority of people watching this show are huge Ohio State fans. That goes without saying. I know we have our share of people that are Ohio State detractors that watch too, who say all sorts of things. Some are good, most aren't. But I even ask you guys, do you give to your school's NIL? What percentage of people do give to an NIL of what is the recognized fan base? I don't know if we'll ever really know that number. I don't know if these foundations, these collectives are going to give out unique giver numbers, unique donations. And by unique, I mean, okay, if you give $10 a month for 12 months over that course of the year, you're still one person because you are a unique on there. If I gave a donation of $500 once, I'm a unique. It doesn't matter that I've not given 12 donations. It's just a unique. It's like a unique viewer on a website. How many people give? What do you think the percentage is? I mean, and honestly, I guess it kind of goes down to what is considered the true number of a fan base. I mean, we can sit there. There's the active alumni number, but not everybody who went to the school is necessarily going to have the same motivations. And that certainly doesn't take care of people from in-state who wanted to go to Ohio State and couldn't get in and it went to XYZ or whatever, or people that, have become an Ohio State fan, due to proximity or whatever. How do you measure that number? But I would be really curious as to what that number is. And I think the university in the larger point would like to know that. I was talking to a buddy of mine just recently about ways to get more traction with fans. And it was like, well, what if you, during the game, during like the replays of big plays, you put the kids like Venmo up there. And you did this like in maybe even conjunction with the television. You put the kids Venmo or Cash App or something like that up there. And the kid just, saved the season with a big interception. How many thousands of dollars are people going to kick in via their Venmo? It's something interesting to think about. I don't know necessarily, what the tax ramification is there with that. I mean, if you're, I know the thing from gambling, if anything under like 10 grand, you don't necessarily have to, it's not a hand pay. You're not have to fill out tax forms. If you're getting a lot of 5s and 10s and $20 donations, that's not going to necessarily register on the tax front. But again, you have to keep everybody tax compliant in order for this whole thing to work. So I don't know. We've kind of gotten off on a tangent, but that's something we do here on the Big Me Kickoff. And just because it's the first show, speaking of tangents, I want to talk again about a brand new sponsor, No Naturals. And are you ready for an entirely different edible experience? Welcome to No Naturals, where we're shattering the stereotype of one-note, slow-acting gummies. Forget waiting over an hour to feel the effects. Our gummies are like a sprinter out of the blocks, fast-acting in just 15 to 20 minutes or 15 to 30 minutes. Picture this. You're not just choosing a flavor. You're choosing a vibe with 5 core experiences and 6 custom combos. You're in full control, whether it's energy and focus without that crash, a peaceful slumber that lasts all night, or a game-changing burst of bliss and euphoria, these edibles are the real deal. And the best part, you don't need a doctor's recommendation. No Natural gummies are dispensary quality and discreetly delivered right to your door. So whether you're craving a productivity boost, a good night's sleep, or some blissful euphoria, say hello to No Naturals. Try them today and use code HUDDLE10 for 10% off your order. Know your edibles. Know your experience. No Naturals. And I can say that I've tried them before. Before we entered the partnership, I got an opportunity to try a handful, and well, not at once, mind you, try a handful, and I really enjoy them. And they did what I wanted. They helped me calm down at night. I am a chronic overthinker. Slow my brain down enough that I could fall asleep and stay asleep, and that is what is important to me. And there are a lot of different opportunities out there. So I'm asking everybody out there, check out nonaturals.com, use code HUDDLE10, get 10% off your order. Who doesn't like free money? Who doesn't like money off? Plus two, it helps us here at the channel. Lets our sponsor know that people are watching and purchasing, and we may or may not get a little bit back on that. But mostly I just want to sit there and have people experience the same enjoyment out of these that I did. But we're closing in on the 26-minute mark, and I think that is about enough for a recorded show. As again, I am going to start doing 3 shows a week. I promise. Reach out to me if you have any specific topics that you want to talk about. Now, if it's just, I want to know what's happening with XYZ kid, that's probably going to be something for a live show. I can't necessarily do 30 minutes, 20 minutes on one player. But reach out to me. 2024 is the year of the Big Me Kickoff. We're going to do a lot more content here. I promise you. I get a lot of messages privately. Why don't you do more shows? Why don't you do more shows? Well, here you go. Took a little kick in the butt from No Naturals for me to get on board with doing a little bit more content. But until next time, have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you very soon.